So this morning, our topic is your history and your home. I have a lot of slides to get through. I'm probably going to fast forward through a few so that we can get through the materials. This is something that I'm very excited about, and all of the lessons that I've had during the retreat, it's been growth for me because learning my own family history and researching it, and then also getting estate planning documents in place for my family, that's something I'm working on, and it's a goal and things that we're putting in place. So these are all very, very personal to me. This lesson will not be, we won't be immersed in a whole bunch of scriptures. I have some scriptures that I'm going to go over. And the first one, Proverbs 21 verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. So this has to do more with the estate planning side, and as you all know by now, I'm a big planner, and I think it's important to plan, and there's some benefits to planning, and we'll see that in scripture as well, but ultimately, God will direct our path. So we can have all these plans and design all these things for good, but just know that the Lord is going to direct our paths. And whether you know your family history, whether you have your estate plan in place, those aren't requirements to make it to heaven. So I just want to be clear on that, okay? All right. So in this presentation, I will cover the importance of family history, incorporating family into your homeschooling, I should say family history into your homeschooling, and why you need an estate plan and last will and testaments. I probably won't be able to get into trust a whole lot, but we'll see. Power of attorney documents for financial matters and for health care, living wills, and trusts. So in 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 41 through 43, the Bible says here, Jehoshaphat was 30 and 5 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 20 and 5 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in all the ways of Asa his father and turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of Jehovah. So one thing I want to impart to you is that your family history, right now, you're making family history, right? You are setting history, putting history in place, and deciding what your family legacy is going to be. So your legacy can be something good, or it can be something bad. It can be something positive or something negative. And we see here that Jehoshaphat laid a good foundation, and so and he walked in the ways of his father Asa. So Asa left a good legacy for his son. And the next verse is 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 52 through 53. And he, Ahijah, the son of Ahab, did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah, and he walked in the ways of his father, and in the ways of his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, wherein he made Israel to sin. And he served Baal and worshipped him and provoked to anger Jehovah, the God of Israel, according to all that his father had done. So obviously his legacy and his family history was something very negative. So I just want you to consider that. Okay, so legacy is something that's handed down from an ancestor or a predecessor, and every Christian home leaves something behind, a path trodden by its members. And there is a high likelihood that someone will actually follow your path. So why is learning about your own family history and imparting that to your children important? Well, your history and your legacy are intertwined. So what you do today contributes to that legacy and what you will leave behind to your children. Keep going. So learning your own family history promotes a sense of self in yourself and your children. It helps you have a better understanding of people and places. It actually promotes a sense of pride in a positive way, not to be full of haughty pride, but just in a positive way. And it also can promote a sense of humility. I mean, we all have probably some very dark things in our family history that we're not proud of, and that should humble us, and that should motivate us to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes or engage in the same sinful actions as people in our family line have done in the past. And then it also promotes a sense of awareness. Okay, so my family history, I just want to tell you a little bit. My husband is like the family history guru right now. I mean, he's really dived into this, and my grandmother passed away recently in January, and when we went home for her memorial service, We didn't have like the traditional repast. We had a little gathering at a family member's house, but he's created a family tree on Ancestry.com, so I'll talk about that in just a minute. But here's some ways that you can incorporate your family history, learn about your family history, and just start memorializing these things, like putting things in writing, creating videos. Back in, I don't know, I think it was maybe 2015 or 2014, I just had this idea, I really need to capture my grandparents on video while they're still with us, so I have this for my children who were, really, really young at that time, and we can reflect on that. And so thankfully I have 3 grandparents on video. I wasn't able to get one of my grandfathers, and I have my children, interacting with them, and I had them tell our family history from what they could remember at that time. So I have dates, I have birth dates, I have, childhood memories, and it's wonderful. And I did that for my husband's grandmother too. And so when we go home to St. Louis, they're able to reflect on that, and the family, gathers around and watches it. And you can just whip out your phone. I mean, you don't need any high-tech technology. Use your phone. Start journaling quotes or sayings that your loved ones say, whether it's a dear aunt or a grandmother or grandfather. My grandmother, we call him, her name was Novella. Vassie Novella. Isn't that a fly name, y'all? So we said that she created Novella-isms. And so she would say just some interesting things and just these little cute phrases. And so in her program book, for her memorial service, we captured those Novella-isms in there, and it just made everybody rejoice and smile, and just something to reflect on. So start, journaling those quotes, gathering those electronically, and in paper form. And then I would encourage you to have a DNA test done if you can afford to do so. So years ago, we had a DNA test done through AfricanAncestry.com, and we took the DNA from my grandfather on my dad's side, my grandmother on my mom's side, and my grandmother on my dad's side, and then also an uncle, because I wasn't able to get the DNA on my grandfather on my mom's side. So what happens with that DNA is they take it and they're able to trace the family history, so I know where our ancestors originated from on both sides of the family. So for this certificate, and they give you a certificate, this is from my mom's side. My grandfather wasn't available, so we used my uncle, so they give you a certificate. So Burkina Faso is one of the African countries that my mom's side on my grandfather's from, and they give you a map and then information about the country. And then my grandmother on my dad's side was really interesting, and they tell you the different tribes or the nations that your family originates from too. So with my grandmother, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, she had 5 different countries, so that's just amazing to me. And again, they give you the map and some information. So just be careful with some of these DNA sites, these ancestry sites, because they can actually sell your DNA, and so you don't want that. So you need to make sure that you research that and you know what you're getting into. This particular site, I think it was maybe $100 or $200, and you can do different kits, if you want both sides of grandparents or whatever. So just keep that in mind. And then it's also important to create a family tree, and you can do that on Ancestry.com, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And then also keep a log of the birth dates and death dates and places if you can. Okay, so I just went over this slide talking about the family DNA, so I'm going to keep going. This is what one of the certificates looks like. This is my grandfather, who is no longer with us. And this is a little piece of my family history that I want to share with you, and I have a couple of giveaways. Please don't let me forget to do the giveaways, okay? I don't want to take these back home. So this is my great-great-great-grandfather, Isaac Butler, and as many of you know, I'm from California, but Isaac Butler's family, they lived in Arkansas and also Louisiana, and they ended up in California. Now, what's pretty awesome about him is that, and Vicki, this is where the molasses comes in. I was like, Vicki, bring me some molasses. And she was like, okay. So I'm going to play this little video so that you'll know a little bit more about him. It's only about 2 minutes.
Tonight, we continue our series honoring Black history with the story of an early African-American businessman in the city of Clovis, whose hard work and a knack for business created a foundation for sweet success. Anthony Bailey recently sat down with his family for a look at how his legacy has impacted their lives.
In 2021, a former teacher of mine was honored by the Fresno City Council. While sharing her story, she mentioned that her family had been in Clovis for generations and even had ties to the early days of the Clovis Rodeo. I was intrigued and wanted to learn more. You may remember the woman on the left. Her name is Victoria Blaswich. Recently, we profiled her journey to become the first female officer in the city of Fresno. We quickly learned that being a trailblazer may have been in Victoria's DNA.
They had a house here.
Okay.
And wasn't anything like this, but it was like a shack, but it was comfortable.
The they she is referring to are her great-grandparents, Isaac Butler and his wife, Alice. The here she speaks of is the property on 5th and Music Avenue in the city of Clovis.
She had trees that she had a hammock between the trees, and she would lie there and tell me stories.
We were looking forward to hearing a few stories ourselves. We got our chance in late November at the Big Creek Museum in Old Town Clovis. It was there that a group of Isaac's relatives agreed to share the family history. According to the family, Isaac and Alex moved to Clovis from Louisiana. Isaac, or Ike as he was known, would make his mark in the area processing sugarcane, turning it into molasses.
My grandfather got the what do you call it, sugarcane seed from Louisiana.
Blaswich, who grew up in Madera, was raised by Ike's son George and his wife.
He raised the sugarcane in the field. My two brothers harvest the sugarcane.
Grandpa George would deliver that sugarcane to Ike's farm on Music Street in Clovis.
Grandpa Ike built a small fire. They had to take a mule and take that mule and drive it around the area where the fire was, and it would squeeze the juice out of the sugarcane.
She says her Grandpa Ike refined it and made sugarcane.
They made what Grandpa Ike named ribbon cane molasses.
The molasses came in cans, bottles, and jugs. It was sold in stores around the area. Back on the location of Ike's farm, the family was able to paint a very visual picture. Vanessa Richardson, a former teacher of mine and Ike's great-great-granddaughter, joined her brother Brian in showing us around. Their family lived on the property in the 1960s after relocating here from Sacramento.
Apartments that we're coming up to next that our cousin Jesse built, Jesse Turner. When it was rodeo time, we were able to stand on the balcony here of my cousin's apartment and put our chairs up and watch the rodeo.
With the Clovis Rodeo grounds literally in their backyard, events at the grounds were a part of their family history.
And we put about a 2 by 12 slab, and we'd sit on it and we'd watch them.
But we would have to save that part of the journey for another day. Now, according to newspaper reports, Ike may have been one of the early African-American members of the Rodeo Association. We'll bring you the results of those once we can confirm it. For Eyewitness News, I'm Anthony Bailey.
All right, so Anthony Bailey was actually a former student of my mom. So that was pretty cool too. So I'm gonna start this back again. So this aired this year during Black History Month. I didn't want to play it from start. Anyway, so this is just a way that you can capture your family history. Obviously, I've taken these videos that if my family is in the news or whatever, and I've recorded them, and I'm saving them for our family archive. And so that's an important part of our family history. Our family was one of the first Black families to move into Clovis, California. So I've shared that with the boys. And so my great-great-grandpa Ike, I don't have the original, can, but when he processed the molasses, his face is actually on the molasses can and all that. So it's pretty neat. I mean, lessons about entrepreneurship and just growing your own food and all of that. So lots of things that you can extract from that. Another really cool thing is when I went home for my grandmother's memorial service, she was like the family historian, so my mom has everything now. This is a family Bible from 1919. And so I was able to look through that Bible. It has dates, marriages, birth dates, all of that in there. Everything is so delicate. There were like newspaper clippings. I'm not sure who the people were, but it's more research for me to find out. But just see if there are similar things in your family. And I'm sure someone has family Bibles with this information. Another real cool fact, and kids love these things, and again, my husband is just like great with the family history. So one of my husband's relatives was a Tuskegee Airman. And so he fought in World War II, and he was also a very accomplished artist. And he wanted to make sure that he journaled and chronicled the life of the Tuskegee Airmen, and he did so in this book. So this book features a lot of his art and just the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. I have 2 to give away today. One didn't come in time, so I'm gonna work with Vicki to ship that, but I'm gonna give this out. But again, like when you find these little nuggets in your family history, it's pretty amazing, right? And so our kids are excited about it. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. You can read about Roy LeGrone a little bit later, but he's pretty awesome. So that's my grandmother who passed away in January. So different ways and things that you should collect in terms of your family history. If you have any type of military records or census records, birth certificates, death certificates, obituaries, and you know, people make mistakes, so you have to be careful with those. Divorce records, logs of names, dates of birth, dates of deaths, and places. Go ahead and start getting that information together now. This is just a portion of my family when we gathered for my grandmother's memorial service at Woodward Park Church of Christ. So you can create projects for your children in terms of gathering your family history and learning it. When you go different places and you go to family gatherings, create a log for them and for them to walk around and talk to family members and find out, you know, where they were born, what are some of their interests. You can incorporate social studies and definitely history into that, and of course geography in terms of where all your family members are. So everyone has some rich history that we need to embrace. You have family traditions that you can embrace, and these are all things that you can impart unto your children. And again, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, but you can take those lessons, the good and bad, and teach those to your children so that they can stay away from the bad and embrace the good. All right, my husband said this, which I thought was pretty cool. Making a mistake is an opportunity to leave a legacy. So what did you learn from the mistake that others made? I'm going to fast forward, and he said, this is his quote, I'm sorry. It's easier than we think to have a bigger impact than we know. So I want you to really think about that as we go forward and as you move forward from here. I'm gonna shift gears very quickly to get into the estate planning stuff. Does anybody have any questions about the family history? And I don't know where my slide is with the ancestry.com, but you can create your own family tree, and you can give other family members access to the tree so that they can add the dates in there. If they know more information than you can give them editing privileges or just viewing privileges. So we have all of our, not everything, but Melvin's been working on it, and it's neat and it's easy. And what you do is you take those death certificates, those birth certificates, and you actually upload those as well, because you want to confirm that the information that you have and the dates are correct. But remember, census records can be wrong. We learned after my grandmother passed that the name on her original birth certificate was Allie Mae, and we were like, what? And we knew her as Vassie, Vassie Novella. So interesting, and her birth date was even incorrect. So for us, she was born on September 26th. Her birth certificate says September 25th. But all of her records say September 26th. So that's what we had to go with, Social Security, all of that. So you just dig and you find out these different things. Okay, here's my legal disclaimer. I am not your attorney. I am not giving legal advice. I am giving you information for educational purposes, okay? The information that I share here, you have not formed an attorney-client privilege, or attorney-client relationship at all. So that's just, I have to get that out there. You can see it up here. All right. And if you want legal advice, you should seek an attorney, okay? All right. Have to say that. So when I say I'm living this now in terms of estate planning, I really mean it. A sister passed away from a congregation in DC in 2020, and she named me as the executor of her estate. Now, I had a personal relationship with her. I worshiped at that congregation from 18 until, 30 something. But it created somewhat of a mess because her family could not understand why she named me to handle her affairs. They didn't know me. They weren't members of the church. So it's now 2022, and I am still trying to close her estate because I had a lot of, lack of cooperation from family members. So when I tell you it's important to gather these birth dates, death dates, social security cards, certificates, whatever you can gather and put it in a binder, it's important because I was trying to gather this information from people who I didn't know, who didn't trust me, and I had to tell one person, I said, look, I don't need her money. My husband provides very well for me. I am trying to carry out her wishes to close out her estate in the manner that she wanted it closed out. So why should you have an estate plan in place? And what is an estate plan anyway? Well, an estate plan can consist of wills, trusts, power of attorney documents for financial matters and health care. And you want to do this because you want to preserve your assets. You want to make sure your assets are distributed in the manner that you want them distributed. You want to plan for your demise and your future. We don't know what's going to come next, right? I mean, our health can decline quickly. We just don't know. And you want to make sure that you provided properly for minors and dependents. And it's your money, so you should decide where it goes. Okay, so last will and testament. Everyone generally knows what a will is, right? It's a legal document that gives instructions on how you'd like your property distributed after your death. Now, about 7 in 10 people die without a will, and that's called dying intestate. And there are lots of misconceptions about wills. Some states accept handwritten wills, some don't. You can, put your real property in there. So basically, you decide where you want your assets to go. And you also can appoint the personal representative or trustee, whoever you trust to administer your estate. And like I said, my grandmother passed away in January, and she also named me as the trustee of her estate. So I'm dealing with 2 estates right now, and it's very, very different. A lot of paperwork, a lot of things to go through. But my grandmother had named me as her power of attorney for her financial matters years ago. So I've been collecting all of her things and, on top of the bills and passwords and all of that. So it's not as difficult. So why would you want to have a will? Well, you can lower your inheritance taxes, your estate taxes. Again, you can name someone who you want to actually take care of your estate when you're gone, to administer the things the way you want them administered. And if not, if you die without a will, you die intestate, basically the state is going to decide how your property is distributed. So you have no say in that. They have statutory laws and rules about who's living, your spouse, your children, your great-grandchildren, whoever. There are rules that order that they follow, and they don't know how they're living their lives and whether you would want them to have that or not. And so the personal representative or the trustee, they are entitled to some compensation for their time. Sometimes there's a bond that's required to make sure that they're acting in your best interest, and it's based upon the value of your estate. Okay. So for minors and guardians, right, for our children, you want to plan for them. You want to name who you want to take care of your children if you're no longer here. If, should both parents die, this is something that you want to have in writing, so there's no, there's no confusion about it. And if you don't do that, the courts are going to decide where your children go. And I don't think you want that, right? So you want to have that in writing. Let me keep going. Okay. So life insurance policies, this is something that's very, very important. Very important. If you don't have life insurance, if your husband doesn't have a life insurance policy on himself to take care of you and the children, if he were to pass, I highly recommend it if you can do that. The other thing I want to say about life insurance policies, it's very important that you don't let them lapse. Because let's just say you get a life insurance policy and it's based upon your health now. You're in good health. Well, let's just say you happen to let that life insurance policy lapse. You go for a physical. Well, they find something that's maybe not so good in your health. The insurance company can decide not to renew that life insurance policy that you've been paying into. And so that's very important. The other thing about life insurance is most life insurance policies don't go through the probate process. So they don't go through the courts. So when Sister King passed away in DC, she named me as the beneficiary of one of her life insurance policies so that I could take care of her funeral expenses. I didn't have to go through the probate process, and it was pretty costly. Like, everything was close to $20,000. Yeah, very, very expensive. So that's important because you don't have to wait on the courts to go through all of that. I'm not going to get into joint tenancies. That's a little confusing. But again, funeral expenses are important as well. And so if you don't have a burial policy, and when I say I'm preaching to myself because we don't have one, and so this is one of my goals to have in place this year. But if you don't have a burial policy or cremation policy, whatever you choose to do, look into this now. My grandmother had a policy, and it was really odd. We didn't know that she wanted to be cremated, but she had a cremation policy that she purchased years ago. It was probably $2,300. And today that same policy is almost $5,000. So look into these things. You know, it can be very expensive, but these are things that you should have in place now, and you can decide and really articulate what you want to happen in your will. So this talks about omitted children. So if you have children and you decide that you don't want them to take anything, you don't want to give them anything upon your passing, you can do that, but you have to specify that, you know, in your will, in your estate documents. Otherwise, they would be entitled to their elective share based upon whatever the statutory laws are, the laws are in your state. Afterborn children are also included. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit, where you can have a handwritten will. They're accepted in some states, or you actually need a typed up will, and it usually requires 2 witnesses to sign, you know, that attesting that you're of sound mind, and you should have witnesses that are not related to you. I highly recommend, of course, if you can, to have an attorney draft your will and draft your estate documents, but I have some very basic things that you can do without going that route, just to have some things in place. I'm not going to go through these because this is pretty boring, to be honest with you. This is just requirements of a will. Obviously, you have to be of sound mind. It's very important that you change your will as things change in your life. So again, pointing the finger at myself, right now, the will that we have was based upon when we lived in Washington, D.C. Well, we don't have those properties anymore. We have property in Alabama, several properties, so we need to go in and change that. Well, there also might be a change in your relationship with someone that you've left something in your will to, or their behavior, or whatever it is, so you need to revisit things regularly. Okay, so I just talked about, so I put these little light bulbs to help me remember to tell you some things. When you do have a will drafted or any of your important estate documents, make sure that they are in a safe place. Now, most states, when you have a will drafted by an attorney, they have something that's equivalent to what's called a register of wills. So you execute your documents, and they can be deposited in this government agency's holding place, and then you have your original, and you can give copies to whomever you want. But in case something happens and you die, right, and no one knows where your will is, that's a problem. And so the sister that I'm helping, she passed away. She had given me a copy of her will, but you need the original, right? You need the original. And her attorney did not file it with the Register of Wills in Maryland. So I'm depending on someone that's close to her to make sure that the original will gets taken to the attorney's office. Well, then he decided that he didn't like that she had named me as a personal representative, and he decided he wasn't going to give over the will. So now, like 6 months later, I'm still trying to get this will from this person, and he's refusing to do it. And it just creates more problems. You have to go back to the court, you have to file documents, you have to ask the court to accept this copy of the will, and then you have to have a hearing. Like, it just gets really ugly. So it's very important that you safeguard the will, the original wills, and that they're in a safe place. All right, so that's my take on wills. I'm going to get into power of attorney documents. Can someone tell me how my time is? 19? 15. Okay. Does anyone have questions about wills before I move on? Yes.
Is it good enough, like, I know you said you had to have 2 people sign, I didn't see if you had a notary, like, do you have to officially, like, file it, or have some official person, or can you just sit down with your husband and go through, like, one of the kits you can buy?
Yeah.
And have the witnesses, is that good enough?
Good question. So my answer is it depends on the laws of your state, because every state is different. Now, generally, when you have those witnesses, it should be notarized. It should be before a notary, two people that are completely unrelated to you, and two people that will not be takers, will not receive anything in your will. So I don't advise that you use a lot of form documents, but if that's all that you can do right now, it's better than not doing anything at all. But just make sure that you're clear on what the requirements are for your state. And you can Google it, and the statutory requirements will come up, so you'll be very clear, okay?
Look up statutory requirements.
You can look up wills in whatever state, and the state codes, like that's really what you want to look for, and it'll tell you what the requirements are. Okay, any other questions about wills? Yes?
You don't have anything in place for guardianship with your children? Is that decided by the court also?
Yes. It sure is. Obviously, if you're married, and you pass away, there's no question your husband is going to be responsible for your children. But if both of you are to pass, or you're not married, or you're divorced or whatever, yeah, the court's going to decide. And I don't think that's something that you want. Now the court, let me just leave it at that. Okay, any other questions about wills? Okay, I'm gonna get into power of attorney documents very quickly. So these are called different things in different states. Power of attorney documents, advanced directives. Power of attorney documents are very, very important for healthcare, for financial matters. So they can be called durable power of attorney for healthcare, declarations, living wills, advanced directives. So why are POAs, power of attorney documents, important? Number one, if you are traveling somewhere and something happens to you and you're unable to make healthcare decisions or financial decisions for yourself, you want to have clearly named in writing who can take on those decisions for you. So for instance, for healthcare issues, if you're in an accident and you're just unable to make your healthcare decisions, have you already decided, do you want to be on life support? How long do you want to be on life support? Do you want certain medical treatment, or you want to refuse certain medical treatment? We went through this with my grandmother. Unfortunately, she had multiple strokes. The blessing is we were there in December to spend really quality time with her. A couple weeks later, she had multiple strokes, and she was on a ventilator. She was on life support, and we had to make that decision. But you know what? She put her wishes in writing. So there was no second guessing. My grandmother said, I do not want to be on life support if I cannot return to my normal state of health, right? And the doctors made it very clear that if she were to come off of life support, she would not be able to feed herself. She would not be able to walk. I mean, it was just, she had strokes on both sides of her brain, something in her, it was a lot that happened all at one time. So the family, we weren't arguing about it, right? And God is not the author of confusion. And when you don't have your wishes in writing, it brings upon lots of confusion. So, okay. When you travel, normally when you go out of the country, like, you should put these documents in place, but we know that anything can happen at any point in time. Okay, let's see, my aunt.
Can I ask a
yes.
question?
Mm-hmm.
With the power of attorney, how do you, say, okay, I have one, but how do you, mine's at home. Mm-hmm. So when you travel, do you have to carry it with you?
No, so with the power of attorney documents for healthcare in particular, you should make sure that your healthcare provider, your primary care physician, has a copy of it. And your spouse.
Yeah.
And anyone else that's close to you. But definitely your primary care, because if something happens, they're gonna, need to find out who your primary care, and that should be on record.
Okay, so what if you're traveling and then you end up getting an accident?
Right. So you're not necessarily gonna have that document with you, but any of your family members that you're close to, they're gonna have that document. And so they will be able to give that over to the hospital. Because they're going to ask them, does she have a power of attorney on record, so we know what her wishes are, and they can give that to the hospital or whatever medical facility that you're in.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not helpful for you to have it, just hanging out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't know how that was. Say I'm here, my family's over there.
Right.
I'm not going to be able. I get in an accident. I'm not going to.
But your family should have a copy of it.
Okay.
That's really the bottom line. I had all my grandmother's documents. So you appoint the people that you want to make these decisions for you, medical decisions, treatment that you want. I mean, you can be as specific as you want to make sure that you're bathed every day. I mean, sometimes you have to specify these things. If you're in a state where you can't articulate it, you need to specify it. And power of attorney documents can be in place while you're living, obviously, but they're only in place while you're living. So once you pass away, they're no longer. So although I was the POA for my grandmother's financial matters, as soon as she passed away, I technically wasn't supposed to have access to her, to her financial stuff, and I had to wait to get what's called letters of administration from the court showing that she named me as the trustee of her estate, and then I have to take her death certificate and my letters of administration. It's called something else in California, and then I have to go to all these different financial, it's like wherever she had accounts open, to show them I'm in charge of her estate now, we need to close it out, I need to handle the business. So anyway, so these documents are very, very important. My aunt has seizures regularly, and so my mom is her power of attorney. She's of sound mind, but she's not of sound mind when she has these seizures, and so it's important that we have these documents in place. Again, it cuts down on confusion. Let me keep going. So this is just, again, this is all about the living will or advance directives. You decide when you want the plug pull, basically, if you're in that situation. Okay, let me fast forward because I only have like 10 minutes. It's the same witnessing requirements generally with the power of attorney document. Someone that's 18 or over. It's better to have someone that's not related to you. You shouldn't have the person that's named as your power of attorney to make those decisions for you. You shouldn't have them witness you signing it. There are a couple documents that you can get for like $5. So there's a website. Oh, why did I just blank?
Is it Mama Bear?
5 Wishes. No.
Oh,
what is that one called?
There's one called Mama Bear Legal Forms. It's
Okay.
endorsed by Dave Ramsey.
Mama Bear Legal Forms is one. The 5 Wishes document. I think you can get that for like $5, and it spells out everything. So you can check boxes, you can write in stuff in terms of your health care. So the 5 Wishes, I would definitely look into that document. I'm not going to go over here. So basically with the power of attorney documents, you need to name someone whom you trust, period, right? Who you trust to make your financial decisions, who you trust to make decisions for your health care, but you've also talked to them about it and you've put it in writing, because it's one, if you talk to me about it and I say, well, I think she said this, but she's not able to articulate it, and then another family member says, well, no, she didn't want that. If you have it in writing, it's very clear. I saw a hand.
Should we have someone who's like not our husband or like?
No, your husband should absolutely probably be your first choice.
Yeah, like you said, not related to you. So I was like,
I'm sorry. So when I'm saying not related to you, that's for the signing requirements. Like when the witnesses, your witnesses should not be related to you. But yeah, my husband is definitely my power of attorney. I'd be in a whole lot of trouble if he wasn't.
I was just going to say, when I had my last child, like when I checked into the hospital, they asked you to have your power of attorney, your living will, and so my husband actually went back home and got it.
Yes.
And brought it back, and it turned out it was a good thing because I had complications. Like, it was touch and go, and even though I was still in sound mind and he was in sound mind, like our emotional state was not such that he'd want to make a decision at that point.
That's a good point.
So just having that as backup for him, like he was like thrown a child, like he's got this crying infant and there's like no one there to help him because I'm like, off in the OR, like is she gonna, like, is my wife gonna live or die? And it's like he didn't have, that was just one less thing he had to worry about.
Yes.
At that
Very
point.
good.
So.
And that's another good point. At the hospitals and some like senior facilities, you can ask for form documents and they will give them to you to fill out, and you can get them notarized or whatever. So that's another resource. If you're going, I don't know if you have to be going in for a medical procedure, but you can call and find out. I'm not sure. But generally when you have medical procedures, they will, ask if you have those documents, and they usually have form documents. I'm not going to go into trust because trusts are very complicated. What I will tell you is that there are benefits of having a trust over a will. So with the trust, you don't go through the probate process. Like I said, I'm 2 years in with the sister in Christ. My grandmother has a trust. It gets very complicated. I don't understand all the laws of California. I had a 2-hour meeting with her attorney just to go over everything that I needed to do. But with the trust, you don't go through the probate process. You can get through things quicker. My grandmother has set up, different things for family members. Like I said, I have an aunt that has seizures, who's pretty much, she's not able to work and all of that. So she's provided for her in her trust that she is going to receive a certain amount. I'm the trustee, and so I'm responsible for administering those funds to whoever she's named to receive in her trust. So money's just not given to people in lump sums. And you can set up things for your children as well. You can decide, well, if they're not faithful, if they're faithful, if they've swayed away. Like, you can make all of these provisions, or taking away things in trust and wills too, but you have more flexibility with trust. I'm gonna fast forward here. I'm sorry.
Did you already say if anybody wants this, they can contact you to get it?
Absolutely. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to just post the stuff in our group. Here. So these are things that I wanted to end with, to give you things that you can do this month. Because again, I'm pointing the finger at myself. These are things that I'm working on. So a couple simple things. Ladies, if your bank accounts, right? I know some spouses have separate bank accounts. I don't advise that for a bunch of different reasons. But if you have a separate bank account for whatever reason, put your spouse on that bank account. Talk to your spouse about it. Put someone whom you trust on that bank account, not just as the beneficiary. Not just as the beneficiary. So what happens when you die or something happens to you, if you've named that person, if someone's on that account with you, they can handle the affairs for you, right? And it could be, obviously someone that you trust, but you don't have to go through the probate process for them to handle those affairs for you. Or if something were to happen to you and you don't have a power of attorney for financial matters in place, whoever's on that bank account can still pay your bills. They can handle the things that need to be handled. Now I'll caution you, with power of attorney documents for financials, some banking institutions will not accept them. So it's not an end all, like, I have this document, I can go do whatever with this person's finances. It's better for you to be on those accounts to make sure that you have access to them, okay? You passwords, all of that. So that's something everybody can do today. Make sure you've named beneficiaries and you update those beneficiaries. My grandmother named her husband, my step-grandfather, as a beneficiary of one of her policies. Well, he predeceased her. So now we have to figure out what happens to that. I don't even know who the beneficiary is yet, because I'm still waiting on my letters to say that I have authority to do whatever I need to do. So make sure your retirement policies, your husband's retirement, whoever he's named as a beneficiary, make sure if you have, retirement or whatever, make sure all that stuff is up to date. On your bank accounts, you can name a person as POD, payable upon death, so that if you die, that person gets whatever's in your bank account. Like, I had pulled out a check from my grandmother's account for something, and I looked at that check, this is after she passed, and I was like, oh, it says POD, and it has my sister's name. I didn't even realize that my grandmother had named my sister as her POD, but that's very helpful because you don't have to go through that whole process. Again, don't let life insurance lapse. If you don't have it, really look into it. And then those statutory forms, the power of attorney documents, you can look up statutory power of attorney documents for whatever state. I told you, in a binder or somewhere, you need to keep all of these important documents with date of births, with birth dates, death certificates, birth certificates, all of that, because you have to collect all that information when someone passes away. And it's difficult to get it. I mean, some people just don't want to give you their... I'm still trying to get stuff from my dad. Like, Melvin and I are like fighting with our parents. Like, we're trying to get this information. We need you to give it to us. We're trying to do this for a reason. So get that information, put it in a binder somewhere, have electronic copies. Make sure you're not the only one that has access to your Dropbox or your, wherever clouds you're putting stuff in. I saw a hand.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard like different numbers on how much life insurance a mama that doesn't work and baby should have. Because obviously, I feel the need to have something because I want my kids to be able to continue homeschooling, and I want someone to be able to be paid to come into our home and do that, whether that's a relative or a friend or whatever. But how much would you suggest, like, have you
You know what? It really depends on your individual personal circumstance. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Oh, I was going to say something to that.
Okay. I'll just quickly, it really depends on your personal circumstance. I can't throw out a number for you because the cost of living in different places is different, and the lifestyle that you would want for your, I don't know, it just varies. Go ahead, Holly.
Well, I can talk to you afterwards.
Okay. So my husband has policies. We have policies, and I don't know. I mean, he has it set up a certain way so that I don't ever have to work if I don't ever want to. But he's gonna stop the policies at a certain point, like when the boys are out of the house and all of that. He's like, at that point, if something happens to me, they can take care of you. I mean,
I was just curious.
Sure.
Like for ours, we make sure that I have enough money that we can put in an account and draw off the interest and use that yearly.
Sure, that's smart. We can talk some more.
I was curious what your thoughts were on that.
Okay. Question?
Well, this is a response to her. I don't know if I'm sure some of you listened today, but I think he said in response to that question, his answer is to get enough to hire Mary Poppins. We do all the things. So, we do, this is, I was saying that day rate is enough to
hire Mary Poppins. Okay.
You do cooking, you do the cleaning, you do the educate, all these different things you need to think about what that would be. Yeah, I know I've heard them draw, and then that's the symbol, so you can invest it and draw it.
Thank you for that. Let me try to get through these last couple slides. So for the financial information, ladies, we're home. Most of us are home with our kids. We do not want to be in a hot mess if something happens to our husbands because we don't know where anything is. I mean, my name is not on all of our bills, right? And so if something happens, I'm like, well, where is this? How do I get access to that? So we need to make sure that we have access. You have all of your credit. If you have credit cards, you have all that information in order. The account statements, the account numbers, any investment accounts that you have, businesses, the ownership that you have for those businesses, and again, those burial policies and the placement of those documents are very important. And your sisters, you may have sisters and brothers. If something happens to them, if let's just say they're not married and their spouse, or they're not married, it's on you. It might be on you to get their stuff together. So you need to help them and make sure you have what you need to access their documents. Let me see. Yeah, and I can't find them because when my grandmother passed, we had moved her to 2 different facilities within, I don't know, a year's time, and we couldn't find some of her documents, but her attorneys, had most of them. So we want to put these things in a safe place. So what I want to leave you with is that God is not the author of confusion. And I know this verse, I'm extracting the principle, the context is not what I'm talking about, but I'm extracting that principle there. We don't want to leave our families in a state of confusion. And when we don't take the time to put these documents in place, just some basic things, we create confusion in our family, and we don't want that. Questions, comments? Yes.
I was just gonna say, like Dave Ramsey too, I think it's in his legacy journey. He has like a kit you can order. It's like a box. It has all the tabs.
Okay.
Like your wills go here, your social security cards go here, all your forms, and it is super helpful in the middle of a move. I was at like the Secretary of State trying to transfer my plate. All my stuff was at my mom's house, and I had to call her, and I was like, okay, go downstairs. Find this plastic box.
You knew exactly
in the
where it
plastic
was.
box, find the wooden box,
Right.
and like find my title to my car. And she was able to do it in like 3 minutes. And it's like you don't realize until you're in that situation. It's like
deeds for
totally help.
Deeds for your home, titles for the car, and if you have a fireproof safe box, that's where those documents really should be. And then other people should have copies. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Okay. I hope it was helpful. Thank you, ladies.